Lee, can I start by asking you about your constituents in North East Derbyshire? I've been there with you, actually. Do you worry that some of them might feel a sense of betrayal that you moved against Boris Johnson before we get on to Kemi?
Well, I hope not. The sense I got from North East Derbyshire is over recent months that people have been pretty disappointed with what happened with the Prime Minister, with Boris Johnson, but they were wanting to give him a second chance, a third chance and beyond, because they didn't think some of the things which had happened were of a magnitude which meant that he should lose his job. I think the challenge became, over the last couple of weeks, that it just kept repeating of a different issue or a different problem. And some of those things, were actually quite challenging, and we just couldn't keep going on with it. So I spent months and months and months, rightly, I think, giving the Prime Minister the space to try and sort out some of the mistakes he'd made. But ultimately, you do get to a point where you just go, I'm sorry, this is about as far as I can go. And I hope that is reflective, roughly, of what people in North East Derbyshire think as well.
Yeah, Lee, a lot of people are saying now, we had Brendan O'Neill, the Spectator columnist, on the show yesterday, and he was saying actually that populist promise, I often think populism just means popular to these people, but actually the promise of Brexit and the promise of Boris were so clearly intertwined, especially after the 2016 and, of course, the 2019 general election. Do you worry that Brexit is at risk now that Boris Johnson has resigned?
I think Boris was really the only person who was going to be able to, break the deadlock of the 2019 Parliament, and that was terrible for Parliament, but even more importantly, it was terrible for the country, and it was pretty terrible for democracy. And I was one of the people who, on 3 separate occasions, said no to the Theresa May deal, and so I am very, very keen to ensure that Brexit is delivered, which it has been, but also that we obtain the benefits from it over the 10, 15 years after it, which I'm really committed to ensuring happens, and what I think my constituents in Derbyshire want. At some point, though, you also have to weigh up the performance of the government. I'm a hugely proud Conservative. I want the Conservatives to do well. I'm a member of the Conservative Party for 20 years because I think Conservative values ultimately are the ones which make our lives better over the long term. But the challenges we've seen in the last few months, that isn't the Conservatism that I think is working, and it's something that was obscuring what we were able to do. So we've got Brexit ain't going anywhere. Absolutely not. I wouldn't be supportive of that. We've got loads of opportunities to come over the next 10 or 15 years and in the short term around making the most of our independence. And ultimately, at the same time, we've got to build a conservatism around that, which makes our country even better. The Prime Minister did some really good things, but I'm afraid by the end it wasn't working.
Yeah, because one thing that I'm hoping, whoever the next leader of the Conservative Party is, whoever the next Prime Minister is, I'm actually hoping that they recognise that being Labour light on taxes, taxes are pretty damn high right now, 70-year high, the tax burden, that is. The Green Party, you might as well vote for the Green Party if you want to continue the pursuit of net zero, which I worry is going to be the immiseration of the working class. And the online harms bill, Lee, which I think will stifle speech and debate online. They're all things that I would not associate with an inherently conservative platform. Where has your party gone wrong?
So I think the Prime Minister and the government did some really, really good things. Brexit is a good example of what was done. There's some really good things around trying to put our country in a place which ensures for the long term in terms of R&D and research and development and things like that, that we're in a good place to be able to thrive globally. I think the Prime Minister got the calls right on Ukraine, for example. But the fundamental problem that I think we have is that we are in an era, and we've been in an era now for most of my adult life since the late 90s, where the answer to everything is always more state, or what can the state do? And sometimes you have to stand back and say, as you say, taxes are at a 70-year high. We've spent an awful lot of money. We're spending an awful lot of money every single day. And fundamentally, the question is this actually the direction that we want to go in? Now, we're always going to have to spend a lot of money as a country, as a government. We need to make sure that we support the vulnerable. We need to make sure that we provide good public services. But somewhere along the line, somewhere in the last 20 years, governments of all parties have got to a place where they think that government is the answer to the problem. And government may be the answer in many instances, but we need to be very cautious and very careful about that. And we want a candidate who stands for the idea that government should do some things well, but not lots of things badly.
OK, Lee, so I'm guessing then that you're about to tell me that Kemi Badenoch is that person, and I'm assuming that Kemi's view, like yours is that the bigger the state is, the smaller the individual is.
Yeah, Kemi and I both share a common philosophy, which is that the rights of the individual, the agency of the individuals tend to be able to spend their money better than the state can. And that's often mischaracterised, and it's often mischaracterised elsewhere in the political spectrum, particularly on the left, as we don't care, we're not compassionate, we couldn't give a toss. It's absolutely not the case. We need a strong state, but we also need a functioning state, and there's clearly some issues, not just in recent months, but over recent decades about how the state is functioning. We've got to do some proper surgery to how the state works and how quickly it moves and what it does. But at the same time, we've got to realise that every time there is a new proposal, every time there's a new idea, some of them might be great and we should say, yeah, that will work, let's do it. But every time we bring something forward, we've got to remember that that's taking another incremental amount of money from people's wage packets. We've got to remember that there will inevitably be unintended consequences of that. And we've got to remember that there will ultimately always be lines that have to be drawn around that additional thing which we do, which are winners and losers. And that's the challenge, making sure a state that is effective.
So, Lee, in a word then, Sir Keir Starmer, should he watch out for Kemi Badenoch?
You should be terrified by Kemi Badenoch. She absolutely stands for the Conservative values, which I think North East Derbyshire stands for, and which I hope the country will thrive under.